We will send these slides and an information package and that recording out after the session, and also just ask you to respond to that, just to let us know where it's all landing with you. So I think that's probably covered off everything. My slight anxiety at the moment is whether the gale force winds up here will create a whole lot of wind to interrupt the sound, but so far Tawhia Mātea seems to be not interfering too much across the connectivity. So yeah, I guess we always start with our why, and I guess what excites me about this is that there's something about learning in this particular way, which we're going to explain to you a little bit more, that really aligns well with being community-led, and it's very self-directed learning. So it's not a traditional course, which we might need to discuss a little bit more to explain. But you know, when you go off to a course, like you might have been to an Inspiring Communities workshop, you might get a certificate of attendance that says, I've been to this workshop. But that doesn't say that you know how to put community-led development into practice. And so I guess that's the real power of this Edubit, is that it's actually recognising the work that you've actually done, putting community-led development into practice. Yeah, and ultimately, I think there's something about it being very self-directed learning that very much aligns with community-led development principles, that you're very much in charge. So basically what you're doing is you're putting together a little portfolio of evidence of what you've actually done in your community, and you're getting some feedback from your peers and others who were involved to validate the capabilities that you've actually got to do awesome mahi in your community. So, Anna, without me saying too much more about it at this point, you took part in the pilot that we did on this a couple of years ago, and you put together a portfolio. So can you tell us just a little bit about what excited you about it and what you actually did, and what was the value add of actually doing this?
Yeah, kia ora, Maggie Jane. So ko Anna Parker aho, and yes, I'm based here in Ōtepoti, Dunedin, and when I did the pilot Edubit in CLD, and it might even be 3 years ago. It feels like a wee while ago now. But I was a very busy on the ground community development worker in my local community, and I often didn't have many opportunities to pause. I absolutely loved my mahi, but it was all engaging and all encompassing, and it was woven through my entire life, including my family life. And so what the Edubit did actually give me an opportunity to do was to pause and to reflect and to really think about how I practiced and why I practiced in the way that I did. And I really valued it because it allowed me to bring that awareness to that what I was doing and the way that I worked alongside people in my community was actually really important, and that it wasn't just something that I knew how to do instinctually. It was actually the culmination of many different relationships, people who had mentored me over the years, different people that and communities that I'd learned alongside, and my own reflections on my practice and the many opportunities I'd had in my life. So it sort of gave me an opportunity to weave together a way of articulating a practice that I lived and breathed every day, that was the culmination of many different people's input into my life and my community. So that was the real value add for me, is that it gave me a sense of being able to articulate and actually name some really important values and qualities about what I did and how I did it, and why I do it in that way. So that was, and I have to admit, it was hard to find the time amongst a busy, like a very busy schedule, but it was such a valuable, it was a real investment in me, and I still, and the reflections I gained from the process, I still carry with me quite clearly. So Yeah, a moment to pause
Mm.
and reflect. Mm.
It makes me think of some of the feedback from some of the other pilot participants too, Anna. I mean, one person I remember distinctly, she talked about how mana enhancing it was for her. You know, she'd left school without even finishing high school, but she'd spent many, many years doing great community mahi, and she said, oh, this is sort of like a taste of the real thing. I feel like I've never thought about doing tertiary education, but it's given me confidence that somebody's actually validated and recognized my skills in a different way than they have been before. For her, it was sort of like, oh, well, maybe I would actually even think about some other tertiary study. So for some, it might be a stepping stone, but for others, it's more like, I don't need to do that other tertiary education stuff. This has just been a really good excuse to go and ask other people for feedback and start to make that process of asking for feedback a bit more business as usual of what we can actually do. It sort of gave me permission to say, oh, I need to do this for my study. Can you help?
Mm.
Yeah, so all sorts of different benefits that people actually talked about
Mm.
from the dozen or so people that tried it out in the pilot. I think one of the most powerful things is the process actually helping people name what they actually know. It's bringing from the inside of you, as you say, what you just feel like is inside out.
Mm.
So, so maybe it's a time for you to just think quietly to yourself about what's your why, and if you've got a piece of paper nearby, you might even just want to note that down, because actually having a sense of why you're doing this is quite important, because I think there will be times when you think, oh, as Anna says, I haven't necessarily got the time to do it or whatever. And coming back to your why of why this is important for you and what you're doing in your community is quite an important little anchor point. Um, yeah. And I guess a little bit more about the how. Um,
Mm.
how this actually works is that you basically put together an evidence portfolio of what you can actually do. As I said before, it's different than just saying I've attended a workshop. So the kind of evidence you're going to pull together is a story from your mahi, from your work, that's got a community-led development flavour that shows how you've something that you've actually facilitated. So it could be a particular workshop or hui or series of workshops, or it could be some community-led action. You know, you helped get a community garden off the ground, or, you know, or a community newsletter, or something that you've actually been doing in your local community. And you write up the story of what you planned, how it went, what you learned from what did and didn't work, and then you go to a couple of people, one person who was a participant with you in that, and maybe somebody else who'd been a bit of a mentor, or somebody who'd, you know, who's also understands community-led development, who'd watched your growth over that time and what you did. And so you ask them to attest to 12 particular capabilities in community-led development, to just give you some feedback, really. And then you're basically writing up a bit of a reflection, as Anna said, of how you link what you've done to what's at the core of community-led development and good facilitation. And you reflect on your strengths and what you still need to learn to do things better, or as my colleague always say, betterer. Yeah, so it's not it's your story to tell and to reflect on. How much work's involved is like how long is a piece of string, really? It's really hard to say, but it is a lot of the hours that you're going to spend is actually the hours that you've already spent doing whatever you're doing in your local community. But my estimate from those who did the pilot is that it's somewhere between 20 or 40 hours work that you might spend doing it. you can take as long as you like to do it. So we would recommend you spread it over something like 6 to 9 months. But when you start and how long you take to do it is within your control. It's just good to set yourself a bit of a deadline, even if that has to shift because of life happening along the way, so that you've got a bit of a goalpost sitting there. In terms of cost, Inspiring Communities is putting some of our grant money into facilitating an online learning group for people who are participating, and we're not charging anything for that because we just want to get this off the ground and make it fly. When you're ready to submit your portfolio, Otago Polytech will need $199, we might as well say $200 towards a fee. If you think that that's an insurmountable barrier for you to find that amount of money, one, you might like to think about a grant application if you're already working with an initiative or an organisation that could help find some of that funding and weave it into an existing application for funding. And if all else fails, we've set aside 5 scholarships for people who've put in the hard yards to get this together and for whom, yeah, money is still an obstacle. So I think you could start putting questions in the chat room. I'll just go to one more slide about how to get started. Some of you will have already downloaded some information from the Edubit's website and from our own. I basically think you start with making a bit of a plan, not a lot of a plan. I've called it a guide, not a whip. You're not going to beat yourself up if the plan doesn't go exactly according to plan. But this is someone on the shore of the sea deciding that they're just going to start to dip their toe in that water. I don't know about you, but I'm very slow to get into cold water.
So I'm just going to respond. We've got one helpful question there around the cost again. So just repeating the cost, it's $199 or $200 effectively, and it's to Otago Polytech. So,
and you don't have to pay that until you're ready to submit your portfolio. Yeah.
And yes, this presentation, the slides will be available after this, and you're willing to send them out, aren't you, Maggie?
Absolutely. I'll be sending them out, and a little bit, yeah, and an information pack that's got quite a lot of this on it as well. So in the information pack, I've suggested some of the, not just how you get started, but some of the other things that you might do along the way.
Awesome.
So when you've developed a bit of a plan, then I think the key planning is thinking, what's going to be my case study? You could have a case study of something you've done in the past, but I'd highly recommend it being something that you're doing over this coming year, something that is alive for you now that you're working on, and it's building your reflective practice. You're reflecting on what you're doing. It's integrating that as you're going. So if you look ahead in your year and think, I've got that particular project coming up, that would be a manageable little bite of something that I could think about, that I'm planning for now, and I could be thinking about the documents that I could be putting aside that show some evidence of how I planned things, and then there's something in particular that I'm facilitating, and then I'm going to reflect on it later on. And then you're going to be much better positioned to think about, whoops, who's going to give me feedback on this? And you're going to get them on board early and say, hey, I'm embarking on this this thing called an Edubit, and this is what I'm planning to do. Would you be happy to be one of the people giving me feedback? We've set a minimum of 2 people to give you feedback, but you could ask for more. So it's permission for you to shape this as you go.
Margie Jean, we've got one question about what sort of feedback is received from submitting the portfolio other than the micro credential. What level of feedback do people receive?
That's a very good question. And I don't think, okay, 2 different kinds of feedback. One's formative feedback and the other's summative feedback. So in our little online learning group, you could be coming and asking for feedback. We're going to have this once a month. we had planned it just for an hour, but if all 70 of you who've registered today sign up, it might be a little bit longer now. And that's going to be a place where you can bring stuff and ask for feedback from others who are doing the Edubit at the same time as you. In terms of when you submitted your portfolio, I don't think you can expect an enormous lot of feedback from the assessors in terms of how much time that they can put into it, but I would expect that you will get a little bit of feedback from them on your portfolio. It might be just a few comments of really affirming some of the stuff that you've actually done and one or two ideas of something else to think about that you hadn't already thought of. That would be the kind of feedback that I could expect.
Awesome.
If you I thought the question was going to be what kind of capabilities, what kind of feedback are we expecting from the people we ask in our community? And I've got a slide down here. Here's some of the kinds of things that you'll be asking for feedback from the people locally. And this is going to be the most valuable feedback that you get because they know you the best. So it'll be around, I've just summarized some of the kinds of things. Are you a good listener? How did you help, get this stuff off the ground? Do you help us as a group, actually reflect on what we're doing? How how strong is your ability to build respectful relationships with other people, including, culturally, and how good a communicator are you? How confident are you to lead or just support, good discussions to actually go well? How much do you encourage other people's leadership and not just be the one who knows it all and does it all yourself? That's not the kind of leadership that usually works in a community space. So that's in more detail in the pack that's set out. And so that was just my summary on the slides for you to get a kind of, and it's not that we're looking for people to be experts in all of this. I think the key thing is to have a learner mindset, that you're really open to getting feedback and to be self-aware enough to take on board that. So we're not looking for people to be, I guess you're not getting top mark. I mean, you're not getting marks for this anyway. You're getting just accredited that you got it. But we're not looking for people to be absolute stars. We're looking for them to have that sense of being open to learning and keeping on learning.
So I've just got a few more questions too.
Yep.
One is it just the one project? Is it just the one case study, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, so you can scope how big or small that is. So we have said a community-led development process or initiative or hui or workshop. So I guess when we're getting to a hui or a workshop, that's getting down the really quite small end. And I think it's probably better to be a little bit more than just one workshop. But it's not necessarily saying the whole of what Anna has done in Northeast Valley over the 3 years that she's been, or however many years you were the community-led development worker. So how did you scope that when you did your portfolio?
I think it was a slightly different format when I did it. And so I think
Yeah.
I did 2 case studies for my work. And I think also because the time frame I did a bit of, I had to reflect back on previous work. So, that was just how it worked at that point for when I did the work. Yeah.
But even if it was retrospective, what sort of, can you remember what your case studies were or not?
I can,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So,
yeah.
so I'm
One was a community event that was collaboratively created. So I reflected on that entire experience of facilitating that process. So,
that would be a really good example of, you've got the build up towards that event and who's getting on board to help organize it. You've got the actual event, and then you've got the sort of the evaluative sort of follow up of it.
Yeah.
And in an event like that, you might have actually got feedback about how the event went.
Yes.
If you're planning it ahead, you could decide, okay, I'm not just going to ask 1 or 2 people for feedback. I might actually do something simpler that everybody's giving some feedback, as well as as well as asking a few people to specifically to, reflect on my capability, and you're asking them in advance so that they've got that on their radar all the way through.
There's another question around the time requirement for the online group that we'll be meeting on a Monday.
So I've set it up as an hour a month, and it's not a requirement to attend. It's a choice from you as to when you want to join in. And if we've got a lot of people signing up for that, then I'll ask people to signal some of their questions beforehand, because I'm imagining that, like today, if I answer a question for one person, there'll be quite a few people with the same questions. But it's not all about me having the answers. It's also peer-to-peer learning. So you could be saying, oh, I want to run this past the group. Has anybody got feedback about where my blind spots are on this? Yeah, so we'll make that one up. We've got quite a lot of experience in Inspiring Communities of facilitating online learning groups. So it'll be shaped a bit about who comes and what your needs are, really. So that'll be running for the whole year, and for, well, like probably 8 or 9 months of the year anyway. So it's not a must attend. It's there as support for you when you need it and want it.
So a couple more questions still coming through, Maggie Jean. One is around, do we need to apply and get accepted?
Probably not apply and get accepted, but I'm going to send an email out after the I'm going to send you an email with the slides, and we'll forget the slides. I'll just answer the question. I'll stop sharing for a minute. I'll send you an email with the slides and an information package, and then the recording, and ask you a few questions. And we've got a poll at the end of today as well. So we'd like you to tell us that you're going to embark on it, so we actually do have a sense of who's joining in. We're not going to be gatekeepers and say, no, you can, or no, you can't, but we're there to guide people about actually, if you're brand new to community-led development and you're not in a position to, there might be some people for whom this is not the right thing to jump into, because you just haven't got enough experience. But on the other hand, it's not for the super experienced too. So we won't tell anybody that they can't do it, but we will give some guidance if we think that, we find in say our support session that somebody's really struggling with it, and to maybe guide you to some other learning options instead. Yeah.
As an extension to that question, there is this, they're wondering about what sort of evidence there might be to say that they are engaged in the program, for example, in terms of potentially feeding that back to employers, etc.
Yeah. So you get a badge at the end that you can put on your CV, that your portfolio of evidence has been assessed as you being competent in this, in facilitating community-led development work.
And that was also just in relation to getting the funding up front. So if they are engaging in this, what sorts of evidence will there be that they are engaged, that they can apply for funding through other means?
I think the only evidence for that would probably be an email from us saying, yes, you have registered your interest and you're actively taking part in the online group, and we can hear that you are. Yeah, so we might have to individually tailor that for needs, because you don't actually pay the fee to Otago Poly. You can download the information from Polytech, but you don't actually pay the fee till you're ready to submit the portfolio. So it does put time on your side to find money for that fee. So yeah, I'd happily craft an email that verifies that you are, that you've turned up 3 times to the online group, and I can see that you're making some progress, if that helps a funding application. Yep. Whatever the barriers are, our job is here is to help reduce them, and to help, to work with you to suggest other ways that you can work on reducing them too.
Awesome. So So yes, so I think hopefully that has answered Joanne's question there, but do us know, Joanne, if you need a bit more support with that question. Just another question popping back up was around feedback sheets that somebody has already from workshops they've run in the past. Is that the sort of thing they could use as
Yeah.
evidence?
Yeah. If you've got other evidence apart from the things we've said would be good evidence, put it together. So it's really what the Edubit sets out as what the minimum is. The other thing is that sometimes people have got video-based evidence. So yeah, you can think reasonably laterally about what the evidence would actually be. So it doesn't
Awesome.
you do need some written documentation, but it doesn't need to be all written.
Awesome. I think that may have caught us up with the questions, and just acknowledging that several people have thanked you for the session, Margie Jean, but are having to jump out now.
Right. Okay. So I'll just see if there's anything else here I haven't covered off, but yeah, I guess I'm signalling 1st of March, which isn't far away. We're starting the first online group, so we'll be getting a quick response. You might think about finding a buddy of somebody who's going to really encourage you to in that process as well locally. Eating an elephant one bite at a time, I guess, is the key sort of time management thing there. We've talked about the money. If you really have major writing challenges, we can discuss whether there's other formats that you might actually present your work in, like video. But really, attitude is going to be everything in terms of just having faith that you can do it, and seeking help when you get stuck, not staying. Some of you in your registration said that they were looking for a course. And so just want to signal that in a minute I'll show you a slide with all the other kind of workshops and things that, sort of like courses that Inspiring Communities does already have to offer that you might feel you want to do alongside or possibly instead of this. But so first of all, I'd say just don't instantly say, this looks too scary and different. It isn't the most familiar way of learning, but do reflect a bit on whether you could give it a go. But we have actually got on our line of sight this year, looking at whether there would be an interest in an online CLD basics course. So if this isn't exactly what you're looking for, if you'd be keen for that kind of more taught kind of course, we'll be asking for your feedback in the email I send out on that.
I'm going to just come back again, Maggie Jean, with some more questions. Just want to acknowledge Joanne, who's given some great links in the chat to some funding opportunities. So if anyone wants to pursue those, do have a look in the chat. Also, got a question around if there are any examples of portfolios that could be viewed to help in considering the course or giving some context going forward. So I'm sure that's something that we could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it might be interesting to go back to the pilot participants and see if any of the pilot participants would be comfortable to make their portfolios available. So the only caveat I would say is there'd be some confidentiality issues around that, and also if we choose ones that we think are awesome, don't actually let that put you off, because your story is your story. So yeah, I think it's both really useful and sometimes it can be disempowering as well.
I think, and I was thinking about the context of my own portfolio, Mark-Jean, and there might be quite a lot of, I think part of the process was that it was quite confidential as well. So yeah, I think it's a great idea, but there might have to be some heavy redaction. So yeah.
Yeah, or maybe we could do a pretend one.
Yeah.
That might be another way of doing it.
And another awesome suggestion here from Robin around once we know who's engaged and moving forward with it, if there's a possibility of connecting people geographically or potentially in similar case studies to help establish some buddy connections. So
Awesome
that's
ideas as
another great
always, Robin.
idea. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
another great idea.
yeah. Yep,
Awesome.
yep. And we could actually use some breakout groups in our online learning time for some of that, as well as you doing connecting locally. Yeah.
Awesome.
Any more questions, Anna?
Yes, sorry, I'm just reading quickly.
And I've just noted a spelling mistake on whakaaweawe up there. So please forgive my spelling mistakes.
And this was just a question also just around using historical case studies, just if there was a particular case study that was historical and that gave a best example of your CLD mahi, and then but not being able to, that case study hadn't happened for a while because of COVID, etc. Could that be used for the portfolio? And I would say definitely yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you can actually still get people to give in-depth feedback about your capabilities, because that's often some of the, you can recall it and it's still deeply sitting with you, but if you can't find other people for whom it was memorable enough to be, but yeah, let's assume most things are possible, but I would still emphasize the preference for something that's alive. Yeah. And hey,
another one, sorry.
yeah,
If I submit my case study for this qualification, are you okay if I also share it with other people? Yes.
absolutely. This is
Your
yours.
work, yeah.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
yours.
I would, yeah. So I guess this slide that has been sitting up here is really just to remind you that there are various other forms of learning that Inspiring Communities offers. So we're trying to tailor a whole lot of different ways for people to learn. The Connect monthly peer mentoring groups that some of you have been part of, they kick off. We've got an information session like this next week, and they'll kick off in March and early April. And we picked up Robin's great idea, actually, of it's often quite hard for people to commit to 4 in a row. So that's going to be a situation where your fee covers you for 4 sessions, and you can choose across the year when you can best come to those. So otherwise, things like community building block sessions that I think you, Anna, are involved with, aren't you?
Yeah.
We're going to have some alternate 1 month a community building box tools session. And do you want to explain a little bit what those are?
The community building blocks are, yeah, they're more of a nice short bite on a skills focused session, and they'll be happening every second month. So just going for a reasonably deep dive, but just for an hour and a half, with a particular skilled facilitator, and exploring an aspect of CLD practice. So I've found them really valuable to be a part of. So.
Thanks, Anna. And there's more stuff on our website about those. We started webinars last year and they became really, really popular too. So yeah, I think we've covered most things, and probably the most important thing is to run our little poll too. But you check if there's any other questions that people, or comments that you actually want to make, because you might want to put the odd comment in the chat room about what excites or terrifies you about this idea. Yeah, hopefully it's more exciting than terrifying.
We've just had another really helpful link in the chat to other potential subsidies. So do have a look there in the chat for those links, and we might salvage them out to Margie Jean and send them out with material afterwards. And also we've got Kelly saying that the building blocks are great, so she highly recommends them.
Cool. But any resource suggestions like that, by all means, fill the chat up with, and here's Andy Kilsby from Polytech, who was our partner in crime helping us develop this, has just managed to join us as we're just about finishing. But welcome, Andy. we've all got videos off because of internet connectivity, but lovely for people to see your face. We've just about covered the lot now, but if anybody wants to ask Otago Polytech about anything, Andy's our man, who's just joined us. So
what a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Maggie Jane.
Awesome. We've also just had one more question come through, or a suggestion really, is that if there's any scope within this group and those who are joining for rural based community-led projects, then there is potentially a funding stream through WNZ.
Fantastic.
So it's another possibility. Another question, does the Edubit link into any other qualifications? That's a good question for Andy.
No,
turn your video on, Andy.
Okay, I can put my, I thought I was going to save a bit of bandwidth, but
no, we're fine. We haven't fallen over yet.
The Edubit is designed, or the micro-credential is designed to stand alone as a representation of the learning that's contained within this experience. So formally doesn't map into any other qualification. However, the type of material and the I guess the plethora of further educational opportunities, there could be an individual chance for recognition of prior learning to be applied by another institution, but there is nothing formal in place to enable that to happen. So it would be very much on a case-by-case basis.
Awesome. And then we've still got a few more questions coming through here. So one is around, are you aware of any other community-led development qualifications available? And or do you recommend any courses to support further learning outside of this micro-credential?
Not specifically, but we can look into that. But I think there might be other people around the table who are better placed than myself.
Yeah.
So on Inspiring Communities website, which we are in the process of doing a major refresh on, I know I have put a list of acknowledging the work that, just because Anna and I happen to know more about what Otago Polytech's doing, to honour the other institutions around the country who do have different community-led development teaching. It's often embedded in a wider qualification like social work, or in other, health and well-being and community development, for example. But I could, I might actually add some of that to the email as well. As far as we're aware, there's nothing that's quite specifically looking at community-led development in the terms that Inspiring Communities means. But I will be pleasantly surprised if we actually discover that we're wrong. So we don't feel like we're not on about having a monopoly on these things. We're actually about growing a movement. So the more that's available that brings people together locally as well is really helpful. But traditionally, I mean, back in the 1970s, when I first did my youth and community work training, it was only in that often related area of youth work, community work, social work, where these approaches were even talked about. And the sad thing is that, actually there's people across a whole lot of other different places and spaces in life and roles in life that want these skill sets, not just people working in those youth or social work or community work professions. So that's our intent, is to make something that's very accessible for people.
And just a few more questions still to come, I'm afraid, to move through here, Maggie Jean. Is that okay?
Please
so we've
do.
got one, and this one might be for you too, Andy. Is the $199 fee for the submission, is that all up? Or if the portfolio is not up to scratch, is there another fee for a resubmit?
No, that's all up. That includes our assessment cost, the potential interaction between learner and assessor. And then also we wrap academic quality aspects around this. So there's moderation and all those, an annual review and all those lovely things that we need to make this stack up as a academic or quality academic product. Awesome. So, yep.
Awesome. So they get feedback and can resubmit it when necessary. That's awesome.
Yep. We tend to, what we're trying to do with this, and it's still an aspirational goal, is to make the assessor, I guess, more of a human relationship, as opposed to the kind of like, computer says no or yes. And certainly that would better fit the, I guess, the jour de vie of this particular educational experience.
Yeah, Kia ora. That's awesome. Another lovely question here is around, is there a formal graduation for this Edubit? Because CLD is all about celebration. So I think we'll have to make one in Dunedin there, Robin.
I'm all in for a party.
Yeah.
I guess just to make sure people are absolutely clear, it doesn't give you the right to cross the stage in a formal OP sense, but it certainly is. It's hopefully something that's a little bit more ubiquitous there. We can actually fit into something that your organisation would like to do to recognise success.
Yeah. Well, it might be parties, you know, we say, why have a meeting when you could have a party? So it might be that we facilitate our own community-led party celebrations in different areas. Yeah.
Happy to be invited.
Yeah. It will be led by those involved, but all awesome ideas today.
Awesome.
How's the flood?
I think that's caught us up, and there's just some more useful links there and a bit of discussion about social work and where CLD practice actually sits. So yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
it was a timely intervention.
Yes.
Yes, it was just in time management as usual, Andy. So,
you know me well, Margaret.
just really want to acknowledge Andy and the long mahi of this. I also want to acknowledge the Department of Internal Affairs actually, because the original idea of creating a qualification came when Inspiring Communities, we were doing some work with Department of Internal Affairs community advisors many years ago as they were getting their heads around what's community-led development and how do we do funding in a more community-led development way. And somebody said, oh, we're doing all these workshops with you. Do we get a qualification? And we said, nah, too hard basket. You know, it was too hard to write a unit standard or whatever. It just didn't fit with any of those old systems. And it was just pricking up our ears when Otago Polytech started developing Edubits. We thought, actually, maybe an Edubit is the thing we need to make this work. So the fact that Otago Polytech's been at the forefront of innovating a lot of different forms of education has really supported this. And when we're saying, does this lead into other qualifications? Well, there's another whole part of Otago Polytech called Capable New Zealand, which Anna and I work in as well, you know, that is actually supporting people in different forms of recognising work-based experience in more in-depth qualifications at bachelor's, graduate diploma, master's, and even doctoral level. So that's another conversation for another day. But yeah, just really want to acknowledge the innovative role that Polytech has played and the goodwill, but with Andy in particular around this one to just for quite a long period. But it was especially with the Department of Internal Affairs people and Anna and some others in the community that we piloted it a few years ago and said, yes, this does feel like something that's worth running with. So and I'm just thank you all hugely in closing, because when we put an initial teaser out before Christmas at the end of a challenging year, we instantly had about 8 or 10 people say, yeah, let's do this. And we ran one little information session there that was very small and conversational, and I couldn't believe it when the registration started coming in for this and we got up to 50, 60, 70 registrations of interest. So and just acknowledge that there's a few people I know here who are part of a team who are going to do it together as a team in their workplace, a couple of community development departments, local authority ones, and I just think that's awesome in terms of what that can support in terms of team learning and reflection as well. So they've got lots of ideas today. I think that this isn't something we necessarily have to do alone, that we can really create some little teams and groups that are learning together as well. So
just jumping back one more time with another question, Margie Jean, just around the requirements for submission, and is there an outline guiding the submission for things like formal formatting, word counts, presentation, level 5, as per a level 5 qualification, for example? So
there is some guidance on the Edubit information, and if it's silent on things like typeface and format and things like that, then that's, I think, just permission to put it in something that's legible. So it's not as prescriptive. We've tried to make it not too prescriptive on some of those things.
Yes, I'm not sure what referencing rules you put in place, Maggie Jean, but
I don't know that we actually put any in.
I'm
So
saying that with my tongue firmly in my cheek.
yeah. So yes, we will be encouraging things like, it's helpful to not, well, first of all, we're not going to plagiarize other people's words as though they were our own. It is helpful to put a hyperlink or something into a resource that you've referred to. And we will be encouraging you to refer to some authoritative resources, but yeah, trying not to prescribe too much is the order of the day.
Some pleasure there. No, it's someone has just acknowledged their APA referencing is a bit rusty, so that's good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we're pracademics, not academics in this space, and pracademics are very practical people. Yeah.
And there's also a suggestion around promoting the Edubit with CLD partners. DIA CLD partners. So,
yeah, we're running a workshop for the CLDP partners next Friday, and we'll be talking about this as one of the options. Yeah.
Really? Because I am a CLD partner and I've heard nothing about that, Margie. I am the sole worker for one of the 18 partners and I've not heard anything.
About what?
And I'm heavily involved about the workshop you're running next Friday.
Well, we've been invited to talk.
Oh, you mean just at the HUI?
We've been invited to.
Yeah, no, I'm running the HUI. I'm in the very small team of people who are running it.
Yeah.
I've put hours and hours into it of my own time.
We've been asked to run an 1.5-hour workshop.
I thought it was about governance.
And its theme is about investing and learning.
Oh, okay. Cool.
It's about investing and learning and how we embed that in how we do governance and other things. And we'll be sending out that kind of over. We haven't allowed a lot of time for talking about the Edubit, but we have allowed space for So yes, Joanne, if in an ideal world we would have been coming back to everybody involved with a draft of what we were doing, but we didn't get the feeling that there was time for.
Yeah, it was slightly.
So yes, we'll be making sure. This is a good reminder to not shortchange the time for talking about things like this. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think that's caught us up with the chat.
Well, maybe it's time for us to draw things to a close, and me to just check that there's nothing else on the slides that I had planned to do. I think we were probably ready to close with our closing karakia, which feels particularly poignant, giving especially the peace, love and safety in these slightly challenging, unpredictable times of COVID. So kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te aio, te aroha, me te maruto, te hei Māori ora. Thank you, everyone. Go well, go gently, go safely.